we're going to move to our guest speakers, the first of which is Andy Chitty. So Andy is the director of the University Shared Resources at Oregon Health and Science University in Portland, Oregon. And he's recently worked with the core leaders and the university's HR people to implement a core scientist career track. So I think we're all looking forward to hearing about how this went in Portland and whether or not these models could be deployed where we are. So the title of his talk is Creating a Career Path for Shared Research Resources Personnel, a case study from Oregon Health and Sciences University. So thanks, Andy, for joining us, and feel free to share your screen and start your talk.
Excellent. Thank you. Are you seeing, just want to make sure you're seeing
I'm seeing your PowerPoint.
Okay.
Yep, looks good.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction and for the opportunity to talk to you. I am Andy Chitty from Oregon Health and Science University. I used to be the president of the Association of Biomolecular Resource Facilities, which is a core society in the United States. It's international, and hope to hear from you there as well. I'll go through kind of the first slides fairly quickly because it seems like most of you are familiar with cores and shared resources and platform facilities. But I just wanted to put something in there just in case some of the audience wasn't 100% familiar with it. Cores are, of course, advanced technology centers and hubs of expert services supporting research on campus. And I'm the director of the University Shared Resources at Oregon Health Science University. I direct a portfolio of cores on campus, and those are they're considered critical infrastructure for our investigators. They offer access to technology and method experts, advanced and facilities with advanced equipment. The reason why institutions need cores is simply the equipment is very expensive. Facilities and experts then are there for everyone to use in a more affordable manner. And I use, because my wife doesn't really understand cores, she's in a totally different line of work. I use the analogy of a copy center lots of times with my friends who aren't familiar with these things as well. The copy center, if you need 10 copies of something, you're not going to buy a copy machine and put it in your house and make 10 copies. You're going to go to the copy center, make 10 copies and pay per piece. The same thing in a core. If, for example, you need an hour of time on a microscope, that microscope might be $1 million, and it's not cost effective or tenable for you to even put that in your laboratory and utilize it as an investigator. And also in the cores, the staff is highly skilled in those particular scientific disciplines, so they can definitely help you optimize your experience and design your experiments for those particular scientific endeavors in each core. So it's kind of like, real quick, if this is the research community and you have the investigators spread throughout this cloud of the research community, if you had to outfit them with all the equipment they needed, you'd have all these different researchers duplicating their technology across campus. Rather than that, we take cores and put them in centrally, and then offer connections to all this technology and activity that you might need. And then you can move to another core, and once you get your data, run it through DNA sequencing, then go to microscopy, whatever it is you might need, or get mouse models. And we have about 20 cores at OHSU that are in my program. So core scientists therefore differ from traditional research scientists. General research, as we call them, general research at OHSU, the staff positions, they're personnel that are in academic research positions, and oftentimes they're there gaining experience for future opportunities, such as publications and grant writing, becoming a member of faculty, and developing a future career. So they're working on a trajectory that's specifically for becoming a PI or a researcher. core staff members there, though, dedicate their careers to servicing the needs of those general research staff. So they're not on their way to, most of the time, not on their way to becoming a PI. Their expertise is built around specific technologies and specific methods. And they tend to be customer service oriented and collaborative because they work with a lot of the different researchers on campus. So one of the problems that we ran into, and I think it's true of many institutions nationwide and possibly worldwide, is that our core personnel, our core staff, are classified in the general research arena. And that's problematic because they're so well trained and they have on a wide variety of projects within their specific scientific discipline that we found they were being poached away by industry folks, as well as other institutions, but industry folks who were really looking for the kind of expertise they had. And we ran into a crisis in proteomics, but especially in flow cytometry, where we almost had to shut the core down because we were down to 2 people from 5, and we were about to lose those 2 people as well. So, you know, as the saying goes, never waste a good crisis. We jumped in and decided to develop the core scientist job family that was distinct and different and more professionalized and long-term oriented for our cores. And this is just a general statement about the focus. I won't read that first paragraph, but it's the second paragraph. Their, you know, salaries need to be considered separately from the general research population to recruit and retain. Because they are looking to have a career in cores, many of them for as a long-term career. When we lose those people for whatever reason, we lose a lot of community knowledge and the ability to service the research community at the level that we need to. So we worked on this core job scientist family, and we worked closely with HR and compensation to try and make sure that we, to the best we could, emulate the general research format of 5 different categories or 5 different title levels of in our core scientist series, so that we could kind of plug into what was already the infrastructure that was already there in HR. And so again, we wanted to emulate it as much as possible, but also make it distinct and professionalize it for the long term. So we developed this, what we call a core descriptor matrix, which applies to all cores. It's kind of an umbrella approach for all cores on campus, which was assistant core scientist 1 through senior core scientist. And I didn't include all of the activities associated with each level. It would be very heavy in text if I did that. But you can see that there's a progression that is just general around the idea of being a service center in service to the research community. So this one applies to all cores, but then what we did was we asked each core director to develop their own core descriptor matrix that was specific to their core. So you'll see with advanced light microscopy, demonstrated experience operating a light microscope and acquiring digital image data in a research setting, okay, and all the way through senior core scientist. And all that applies specifically to the light microscopy core. In this way, someone who's starting out as assistant core scientist can easily see what skill sets do they need to develop to get to the next level, and what does their future look like if they want to spend 20 years or 15 years or 10 years in a core. How can they get to a level which is more senior and with more responsibility? So let's just quickly take a look at assistant core scientist 2 among a few different cores: flow cytometry, electron microscopy.
Exactly my presentation.
And histopathology. So you can see that flow cytometry has a set of skill sets associated with its core for assistant core scientist 2, and it's specific to flow cytometry. Electron microscopy has its own set associated with that type of microscopy, and histopathology has its own set. They all provide services. They're all service centers, but the services, of course, differ from core to core. Then we had to set out with core scientist minimum qualifications. And this was an interesting exercise because we really wanted to focus on what are the skill sets necessary. Not necessarily does someone have a specific degree and a certain number of years of experience in the scientific community. Rather, we wanted to know, can they do the job that is necessary to do for that course? So we tried to add in language that allowed us some flexibility, especially on the first two levels, to cast a wider, more diverse net for our potential workers in the course and staff members. So you'll notice that in the red, we say equivalent in combination of skills, okay? Skills, education, and experience. We wanted to make sure that we could bring someone in, maybe who has an associate's degree and not a bachelor's degree, who has a skill set that would allow us to start them out in the Corps. And then as they progress, they may choose to go on to a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD. We wanted to be able to give some opportunity and concentrate on what skills are necessary to do the job. And this again allows us to have a more diverse approach to our hiring practices. So as I said, all corps provide services, and therefore they can all be categorized as one job family, right? Because they all have recharge mechanisms, and many of them have central investments from the institutions. But services and costs associated with those services differ significantly between the corps, and that's especially true of the salaries. That's where we had to break away into smaller groups for the corps and really think this through, because some electron microscopy is a field that is in high demand. Histopathology, we seem to be able to staff that corps fairly easily, at least in our region. And we have to be cognizant of costs. So we have to be careful not to drive the salaries up so much that people can't afford to pay for them. So what we developed from there were salary ranges associated with technology in the core services that they're in. We tried to group cores together, and we tried to start people out at about the same level. Although I will say we're struggling with that now with HR, because HR wants to start all people out at the $40,000 level. And these numbers are just for demo purposes. But it's been a little bit of a challenge. We have some more nuancing to do, but you can see that in core salary group D, the technology required and the demand for that technology, and maybe, people come in with certain licenses and so on, requires a wider salary range than, say, cores that reside in core salary group B. So that was how we tried to address the need for some sort of flexibility within our HR functions to really try to address both being financially responsible and at the same time being able to recruit and retain people at the levels we need to. And we also set the salaries such that someone, as they move from one job title to the next, they can progress and have a career approach that is, that offers them a salary commensurate with their experience in a long-term fashion. In the end, we were able to retain some of those key personnel, including we kind of rushed as fast as we could to try and push this through to develop in time to save ourselves the last two people in flow cytometry. We were able to do that, and as part of this process, we were able to roll it out amongst all the cores that were part of my program, and we're rolling it out now among other cores that are in departments and not necessarily in the entire university shared resources program. And we were able to offer them a core career that, with their long-term opportunity, with a salary that is sustainable for them in the Portland area. It also offered them sort of a sense of belonging among their core colleagues, sort of this feeling that they are not sort of outside the norm. They have this distinct approach and this distinct career classification set that gives them sort of a sense of understanding of where they fit within the institution, which wasn't always the case before. And with this, we can make changes as the market evolves. If we need to move one core into another salary group or something of that nature, it allows us a bit of flexibility. So this was really helpful to us as an institution, and I think the effect on the core personnel was extremely positive, and so it's one of those things that I'm proud of that we were able to do with the help of the core directors, HR, and the executive leadership and the PIs who supported the process. With that, I thank you, and if there are any questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them, and I will try to stop sharing here.
Yes, thank you, Andy. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
We purposefully left lots of times for questions, so I see Vidu's hand up. Maybe Vidu first, then Pete.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Andy. This was great presentation, and kudos to you, like, for pulling this big project off the ground. This is really a big challenge, of course. Just curious, two questions actually. One is about the possibility for each core to have all positions, like, you have core scientists 1, 2, and then you have all the way to, different groups. So do you expect that, because currently, like, many cores, they just have a one person kind of taking off different hats and doing various different roles, like technical as well as management and so on and so forth. So did this method of different job descriptions kind of added number of personnel per core for in your situation, or yeah, that's kind of one.
So each level builds on the previous level. So any set of skill sets associated with the next level includes the skill sets that was in the previous level. So as someone in the core broadens their capabilities and their skill sets, they can move to the next level. So it really shouldn't change the number of people. It just is if you will, sort of a position description or a job description that lays out specifically what it takes to move from one group to the next, or to progress in your career in the core setting, as opposed to being an associate scientist in the research, being labeled that when it doesn't really fit your job.
Okay, sounds good. And the second question, kind of follow up with that for the career progression path. So does this mean that everybody, like, for example, if somebody starts as very entry level position, they end up kind of going into that? Because usually we tend to try and retain people for their life. Like, we would love to have them because this is like very specific skill set. So that means if we have an entry level person, they probably could progress to the core scientist or the highest level in their careers path, or is it something kind of separately going on, because we would already have like an expert as well in the lab?
So what we found, and one of the reasons why we were at a crisis stage for us in our cores, was that there were people who liked the academic setting that worked in the cores. They liked the work. They liked being able to work on many different projects. They weren't interested in necessarily applying for grants and things like that. So, but their salaries were set at sort of, perpetually set at a level that wouldn't allow them to progress later on. So they were leaving not because they wanted to go to another career. And if someone is in a core for a couple of years and says, I want to work in the commercial industry, that's great. We want them to be able to progress and do that. We don't want them to leave because they see no future for themselves there, and because they feel like they have to, because financially they can't count on a financial future that will allow them to stay in the core. We want them, and we can't pay them what commercial industry pays, but there are benefits to being in the academic research environment. There's quality of life issues and things like that. And so if we can offer them enough that they can make a career out of it, then those people who really want to stay can. And that was really what we wanted to address. But certainly if someone decides later on that they want to pursue something in a flow cytometry company or a mass spec company, that would be great. It's great training for them.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Pete, please.
Andy, that was a really great talk. I like the piece of work as well. That's really neat. So I'm looking forward to seeing the slides and match them up. I wondered too, it'd be really cool is to match those pay grades across to the classic academic pay grades to show the comparisons to them. And over here, we compare from senior lecturer down to postdoc, down to research technician.
Mhm.
It helps from an academic mindset when academics appreciate where the pay scales are, that we are their peers, not their subservience. And it gives that that respect. And that really helps. So I just wonder if it's worth matching that across to those. I know when you go professorial pay scales, it becomes more difficult because that's very varied, but for the others, it's possible.
So that's an interesting question. I will start out by saying this was for core staff. We haven't addressed the leadership. So if someone's let's say a PI or something like that, and you try to compare that to the core director, we're still trying to work on the core leadership side of this. This is for core staff, so it's more compared to the general research population. And once these get published, they should have been published a while ago, but our HR group has been very busy. But once these get published, everyone will be able to see them. And the pay scales, we had to depend a little bit on the core directors to set, based on what people were being offered from other places and what their experience was and knowledge was. The problem is with that was it's hard to match it to other cores in other institutions because other institutions are having the same problems, right? So we're kind of trailblazing a little bit here. However, you can see now that we've set the pay scales, you can see what they look like compared to the general research population, and you can see that they're higher. So all of that is very open and transparent. Not completely yet because we haven't published them, not because we don't want to be transparent, just because of time. I don't know if that addressed your question.
Yeah, no, it does partly, certainly, as well as it can do. So yes, you've answered it perfectly well. I was going to say, actually, some of our more junior core staff are up on lectureship pay scales. So they are, and so our retention is really good. But that's at York. It's not common across the UK. But I wanted to raise your awareness of something that's happened. Liverpool have really driven this in the UK. And they now have a scale that actually means you can now get something called a professor of practice. So someone who's running a singular core facility. And actually Andy Philby, who I think some of you may know, has just become professor of practice at Newcastle. And he just runs a flow course facility. So he's not senior to that. Alex Lawley's actually above that, but he's not professor at status yet. So actually there's that recognition of the skills and the expertise and the international profile and everything it brings to the university through that pay grade. It's now being recognized. So I think actually what you're doing with yourself, what Liverpool are doing, what Newcastle are doing, could be good to really mash these together and show the different exemplars. So I think that will help many say, well, look, this is what's happening here, here, here. There's not one solution.
And that's why I love giving these talks, because in the United States, we're really trying to work together among different institutions to the extent we can to have, to the people that I've worked with so far, to have sort of similar approaches. And NIH is, I think, really pushing for more recognition for cores as well. And so if we had more of a codified approach to core scientists as an industry unto itself, in much the same way that, let's say, faculty and research ranks have, I think it would be very beneficial to these core scientists.
Yeah. Andy, that's great. And just again, I thought it was a really brilliant talk. I love what you're doing. It's really
Thank
cool.
you.
So let's take a question from Yara. Please go ahead.
First, I really love the talk, and I understand we're gonna get the slides, or is that a possibility? Because I'm definitely gonna come back to you with the details of the different scales, and we are working together. I see on the chat also comment to Philip Hotterberger, so together with Phil and Graham Wright from Singapore and Carrie Thompson from Ireland, we're working at Global Bioimaging for a career path recommendation and paper, and what you're saying fits exactly to everything we've been discussing in the different parts of the globe. My question was actually coming very close to Peter. If the comparison to the say pure classical academic path was done by you or by HR, because what we see many times is that HR does not understand the new scale and always needs to go back and compare it to the scale they already know. And there has been limitation in many countries. So I'm right now living in Germany. If you go to HR, they get a big book like this in Hochdeutsch, in German, and go through the scale and ask me, where do I find that there? So how was it possible? So you said HR, you're having a little bit now difficulties with HR for the starting point, but how was it possible that university, so that you got it, that they accept is completely independent and non-traditional scale, or is this still very much in the beginning of that process?
So yeah, that is going to be a challenge, and we got through it because we had sort of an HR and comp advocate in compensation, and you need to I think one of the things we did was we did a lot of the heavy lifting up front to try and develop a whole matrix that fit within HR's standard thing, and we showed the HR that we understand what their situation looks like and what they need us to fit into. And then, that helped. And we didn't ask them to go out and do all the work for us and do the structure. We looked at what they had. We did the structure that met their approach. And then, when we showed a lot of respect for what they were trying to accomplish. And then when we developed a bit of trust with HR, we were then able to turn around and say, we need to work together on the compensation, because there's no way you can truly know what the compensation looks like. We know we're losing people at these salary ranges, so they trusted us to set those salaries. That said, that person is now moved on to a different position, and we're working with new people in HR, and we're going through the same challenges again. So it's something you need to stay on top of, and it's something that I suggest you document really well for the future. It will help you if you have documented information about why you chose those salaries and why that salary level is important, so that you don't have to repeat yourself like we do. We're going to be okay, because we're facing again a similar crisis, and kind of have to listen to us again a little bit and collaborate. I don't mean that they don't want to. It's just they're just unfamiliar with it. So I think you really have to work closely with them and build trust. And having a VP of research or something like that back you up is super helpful.
And definitely, I think join or collecting success stories like yours and others around the globe.
Yara, we can't hear you very well.
Sorry.
Auto suggestion would be, can you hear me now?
Barely.
I can write, but the not all suggestion will be transposable from different regions, but at least will be showcasing some examples, and in some regions that work. So it would definitely be great to have your example as well. I'll come back to you, and
Yeah, I'm happy to help.
Okay.
I love talking about this stuff, because again, like I said, it's one of my favorite things that we've accomplished, because it really changed people's lives who work in cores. It's really nice.
Okay, so let's use some Zoom reactions and thank Andy for that great talk.